This episode of Film Riot is brought to you by Domain.com.
Today on Film Riot, highlights, camera movement, and a tip for cheap diffusion. Welcome to Film Riot, the show that takes the mystery out of the effects and techniques of some of your favorite Hollywood films. I'm your host, Ryan Conley, and hey there, how's y'all doing? Good? Good. So, effing Dark Knight Rises comes out tomorrow. Sweet baby Buddha, I'm excited. I want to ingest that thing directly into my brain activity. I know you guys are excited too. Reviews are good so far too, which isn't really surprising. So excited.
Bane.
So much.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
So much. But that has nothing to do with this episode. Sorry. Ryan, since you were doing the cinematography episode, could you talk about movement? For sure, my digitally internetual partner. We can chit-chat about some sexy movement. So the thing to keep in mind is that your audience is viewing your story completely through the point of view of your camera. So where you place the camera or how you move the camera will affect the way an audience interprets your scene. Whether the audience is aware of it or not, every decision you make as a filmmaker is altering their experience of the story you are trying to tell. Now, I'm not saying that every single time the camera moves there's some deep psychological meaning to it. That's not the case for me, and I think that's pretty much universal. There is such a thing as following the action, which is pretty straightforward, like dollying alongside of two people walking and talking. This sort of movement serves its purpose but doesn't necessarily have any real meaning behind it. However, the technique you choose to follow your actors could have some outcomes that will surprise you. Say for instance, you shoot this scene by simply getting your dolly and trucking with the actors as they walk. A very straightforward shot, has all the attention on the actors and their conversation, but what if you were to take this same scene, but this time you shoot it from a tripod from a distance, so you're zoomed in and panning with the actors as they walk. This could have a totally different feel and could maybe give the impression that the characters are being watched or their conversation holds some sort of secret. Or we could switch it again. Same scene, same character, same conversation, but this time when we trek with them, we don't do it on the dolly, but instead we go with a handheld shot. This will give the shot some extra kinetic energy that you might not have intended to be there. It might feel like this conversation is now intense or leading to some violence, or maybe you're going for some avant-garde thing, which if that's the case, then by all means, go crazy. The point is that even when you think that the shot you choose won't affect the emotion of your film, it really will. An inappropriately chose shot could mean death to your scene, so be sure that the way you choose to shoot your film coincides with the tone you were trying to get across. So with that alone, you can see how much the slightest decision with the camera can impact your film. Now, there is absolutely a psychology to camera movement, but I don't think that there is one meaning assigned to each move. There are so many variables to keep in mind. So for instance, a dolly move in on a subject isn't going to mean the same thing to an audience every time it's used. It's about context. It could be used to punctuate the emotion of sadness from a character by maybe slowly moving in on the actor's teary-eyed face, or under a different context, a slow dolly could be used to make your audience feel uncomfortable by, say, forcing them in closer and closer to a violent act or a villain. Really, it's a matter of knowing the options available to you, then deciding what you want to accomplish with that shot. For instance, in Tell, I use dolly shots often, like this one here. For this, I knew I wanted to start with the cop, then reveal the bathroom. I wanted to open this scene up to create this feeling of danger and to visually allow the dark room to surround her. So I opted for a dolly backwards into the bathroom like so. In another scene from Tell, I had Todd's character find a tool that gives him a terrible and disturbing idea. For this, I wanted the camera to represent Todd's POV in the one shot of the saw, and so I opted for a slow dolly move in since I wanted his focus to slowly be drawn into that saw as he developed this awful idea. On the reverse of this, I have another dolly in, but here we have it on Todd's character, Taylor. This is an effect that is used often for a move into an actor like this. I wanted the audience to be pulled closer into the character to emphasize his madness and for the audience to discover along with him what was coming next. So keep in mind the tools you have and choose the best one for the job. Do you need a dolly, which we showed how to build your own in this episode here, or a jib, which we also showed how to build in this episode here? Now, a jib or crane shot is very different from a dolly. Though you can get some dolly-like shots from a jib, the best part about a jib is the fact that you can get some great vertical shots, which just can be great for things like revealing a location, visually bringing an audience to the character's level, or jibbing to a low angle of an actor, perhaps to visually make them larger than the audience, giving the character a sense of power. For more on what uses you can get from a jib, check out this episode right here of another show I produce called Pimpy Production. This episode is actually totally dedicated to jib use. So to answer the question, I guess I'd have to say there really isn't one answer, because as I said above, every camera movement could mean multiple things. It depends on the context. But one thing motion is good for is exactly that, adding a sense of motion to your shot, which of course is literal, yes, but I also mean emotionally. If you look at something like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek or a Michael Bay film, you'll see that when the action scenes come, the camera is basically moving in every single shot. They do this to infuse this kinetic energy into the scene and keep your heart pounding. Cutting to a static shot here would actually brick wall the pacing and slow the action. Of course, they do take advantage of that for comical effect at times. I'm sure you can all think of a movie where the director cut out of intense action for just a moment, hit a comedic note, and then jumped right back in. This allows the audience to take a breath for just a second before they thrust you right back into the action, which helps keep everything feeling nice and intense without getting redundant. So even a clever break in motion can do a lot for your scene. But there you go, something to get you thinking. Now I know this was super quick. This is surface skimming overview. We could literally spend a month talking about the psychological effects of camera placement and motion, but I really think the best thing to do is just start watching great films by purposefully focusing on what the director is doing with the camera, and not just where they're placing it, but how they're moving the camera and to what effect. The point is to get some films that inspire you visually and spend time studying and breaking them down to try and understand what the filmmakers did and how they did it. This is honestly one of the main ways I've learned the language of film. If you're setting up a website for your business, your blog, your portfolio, whatever it is you want to make website-iness for, the best place to go for your next idea is domain.com. Domain.com makes it extremely easy to set up your domain name or get your website up and running. You can blog, create a website, showcase a portfolio, make them bills, player, do some emailing with your personal email address. There's so much you can do. The guys at domain.com love you, and they want to give you 15% off your domain name and web hosting when you use the coupon code FILMRIOT when you're checking out at domain.com. So remember, coupon code FILMRIOT. And when you think domain names, you should be thinking, you all thought domain.com. I didn't even have to say it.
Logo.
I got 2 tips. One for each of ya. You know what that's referencing?
Nope.
Seriously?
Yep.
Wait, so you do?
Nope.
It's Tombstone.
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
And now you know. Anyway, 2 tips. The first is thanks to someone from Twitter who asked me if there were cheaper ways to diffuse your light since he doesn't have gels, and the answer is yes. In fact, there are free ways to do it. Just grab a bed sheet. Here we have Josh with the harsh 1K light on him. Then we add our sheet, which diffuses the light. And now we have a much more pleasant and soft image. I've actually used this a lot in different shoots. Since the sheet is so large, it creates this really large point of light that spreads light nicely throughout the room. Another cool thing about this is that you can get different color sheets for some interesting effects like this here. The only thing you need to keep in mind is the intensity of the heat coming from your light, but even with my 1K, which gets very hot, as long as I keep it a few feet away from the sheet, there really isn't any issue. Of course, within a few feet, you need to still keep an eye on it. Make sure it doesn't get too hot and burst into flames. You've been warned. Beware! Tip number 2 is for an eye light. I've talked about this before, but it's basically the reflection of light in your talent's eyes. As you can see here, I'm getting a great eye light in Josh's eye from the bounce coming off the table, and you will usually get these lights in the eyes easily without much effort, which is great because it adds a lot of life to the character, and without it, it can sometimes feel dull or like it's missing something. And I have had several occasions when I had my lighting how I wanted it, but I found that I was missing the eye light, and I found an easy fix for this. Get a flashlight, place it near the camera, and point the beam as close to your actor as you can without getting the light on them or the background. Another great thing about this effect is that when you're using harsh contrast, say if I put half of my actor's face in shadow but I still give them an eye light, the shot is still going to look great. You can still see where the actor's eye is, and it feels a lot more pro because of this one little extra. Of course, if what you were going for in the scene is that lack of eye light, go for it. But those are my 2 tips. Daddy! Beware! Okay, ladies, and the opposite. That's it for today. Now, next week, we may have a special guest. We're still trying to lock it down, but it will be awesome indeed. I plan to have you guys sending questions for me to ask said guest, so make sure to follow me on Twitter here and our Film Riot Facebook page. I'll announce who the guest in question is once we have it locked down, and I'll see you guys then when we hopefully have it locked down. Ryan out.